Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here in Depictions Media Radio. I am your host, Michael Clogs, and today's episode, we're going to hear from David Eby as he is preparing to take over the job as being Premier for British Columbia, as he has become the party leader for the BC NDP, as John Horgan steps down and away from his position as party leader and premier. David Eby is saying that he's going to shake up the bureaucracy and he's going to make some changes. What those changes might actually be, we will actually see. But he's going to make a statement about some outlines of how he wants things to get done. That he's expecting to be able to work closely with the mayors, especially the mayors in Vancouver, Surrey, and a couple of other key areas that he is looking forward to working with them because they're also new mayors. They haven't done this job before. So there will be a new type of dialogue is what he's looking for. He's looking to change things so that he can solve the issues of what's happening right now in British Columbia with homelessness, mental health, and public safety. So we'll listen to that. We're also going to hear a press briefing from the United Nations. And there's a large focus on Syria and the chemical weapons, as in a previous episode you heard the UN Security Council talking about what is going on with that, and that we also in a blog post on depictions.media that we see a report on what is going on in Syria, and that report was given to us by Ishumi Nakashima, as the representative going into Syria and inspecting what is going on with the chemical weapons programs, as they have been asked to disarm it and dismantle it. So, and there's of course other key areas with Haiti and Uganda that they're going to talk a little bit about statements from this Secretary General and other important areas around the world that are in need of humanitarian help.
All right, good afternoon. I know you've all had a lot of climate news already, but I will also want to flag yet another report, but this one by the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and it shows that countries are bending the curve of global greenhouse gas emissions downward. But the report underscores that the effort remains insufficient to limit global temperatures rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. Today's report shows that current commitments will increase emissions by 10.6% by 2030 compared to 2010 levels. This is an improvement over last year's assessment, which found that countries were on a path to increase emissions by 13.7% by 2030 compared to 2010 levels, but it is still not good news. Turning to Ukraine, our humanitarian colleagues on the ground tell us that scheduled power outages continue across the country following the latest attacks on energy facilities. We, along with our partners, continue to support communities who are dealing with the fallout of the attacks. The NGO Project Hope is providing mobile medical units and rehabilitation medical facilities in parts of Kievska Oblast in north-central Ukraine, where hospitals have been damaged and looted, leaving them with stripped of equipment and beds and facing severe staffing shortages. Aside from the physical toll on people, humanitarian workers warn that mental health issues are emerging, and this will be one of the most devastating and longer-lasting impacts of war. We, along with our partners, are working to strengthen our capacity to address the growing psychosocial needs in Ukraine, including for medical staff and other service providers who remain where attacks are taking place. In the southern city of Mykolaiv, which has also been under attack, UNICEF has provided a desalination unit for a bakery, enabling it to produce about 13 tons of bread daily for residents. Since February, UNICEF has provided 3.5 million people with access to safe water in Ukraine, mainly by providing water purification supplies. Ooh, two things. Okay. Okay. Sorry, 2 seconds. This morning in the Security Council, Huang Xia, the Special Envoy for the Secretary General for the Great Lakes region, briefed members of the Council. He reiterated his concern about the deteriorating security environment and rising tensions in the region resulting from the resurgence of the M23 armed group. He said that during his many missions in the region, strong expectations were expressed for the United Nations for political, technical, and financial support to peace efforts. Mr. Xia told council members that stabilizing the region and restoring confidence requires sustained and significant mobilization of the international community. Only coordinated, coherent, and harmonious actions will enable the Great Lakes to follow the path of peace and sustainable development, he said. Just to note that this afternoon, I think at 4:30, there is an open meeting on the maintenance of international peace and security. The briefer from the Secretariat side will be Miguel Serpa Suarez, the Undersecretary General for Legal Affairs and UN Legal Counsel. We will try to give you his remarks ahead of time, or if not, at least very quickly afterwards. Come on up. Okay. In Mali, the Special Representative for Secretary General, the head of our peacekeeping mission there, El Gassim Wane, met with the President of the National Transition Council, Colonel Malik Diaw, to follow up on recent briefings to the Security Council and to discuss the ongoing internal review of the mission. The President of the Transitional National Council expressed his gratitude to the mission's support to disseminate the electoral law across Mali. Chad, another, unfortunately, example of what happens when we run out of funds. The World Food Program tells us they may be forced to drastically cut assistance to up to 300,000 refugees from Sudan, the Central African Republic, and Nigeria and Cameroon. This means that by November, only 10% of the refugees WFP is targeting for assistance could receive food assistance due to the funding shortfall. As of September, Chad hosts the largest number of refugees in West Africa, with 575,000 people. In addition, the number of displaced in the country has more than doubled from 169,000 in 2020 to 381,000 in 2022. As we mentioned a few days ago, Chad has also experienced the worst flooding in recent years, which has impacted more than 1 million people. In support of the government's national response plan for the floods, WFP is currently providing food and cash assistance to affected families. The agency is telling us that they need $102 million to continue providing emergency assistance to cover the next 6 months to refugees and displaced men, women, and children, as well as the most people impacted by the floods. And turning to Myanmar, our team there says the increase in food prices is having serious implications on food security. It also continues to force people to adopt negative coping mechanisms, which includes lowering your daily food intake, the selling of assets, illicit activities, dropping out of school, and sadly, early marriage. The World Food Program notes that the cost of a basic food basket in Myanmar is now 64% higher than the same time last year, with rice prices rising 53%. In some areas, including Rakhine State, which is already facing a lot of challenges, our colleagues report that a food price increase of 110%. The average price of cooking oil has gone up by 137% compared to a year ago. Fuel, almost 94%. Nationwide poverty levels in Myanmar estimated at about 40%, reaching 75% in Rakhine. The lack of income opportunities and household savings are being depleted. While food insecurity is highest in the conflict areas of the country, it continues to impact people across Myanmar. Our team stresses the importance of complementing ongoing humanitarian food assistance interventions with food support to strengthen community resilience, including by supporting livelihoods and enhancing productivity. I've been asked about the ceremony that will take place tomorrow at the relating to the Lebanon-Israel Maritime Border Agreement. I can tell you that tomorrow the negotiations process with respect to the delineation of the maritime boundary between Lebanon and Israel is scheduled to conclude with a handover event, which will be hosted at the UN peacekeeping premises in Nakura in southern Lebanon. The agreement on the maritime boundary will take the form of 2 exchange of letters, one between Lebanon and the United States and one between Israel and the United States. The UN Special Coordinator, Joanna Ronecka, will represent the United Nations at the event. She will also receive the coordinates of the maritime boundary, with which both countries have agreed to deposit with us here at the United Nations. UNIFIL is coordinating closely with the U.S. Embassy and, of course, their colleagues at the UN Special Coordinator's Office to organize the arrangements for the event. The event will take place. Nakura, as you know, is the same location where UNIFIL has since 2006 regularly chaired the tripartite forum that brings together the Lebanese Armed Forces, the Israeli Defense Forces, and the United Nations. Tomorrow they will be, later today, be briefing at 1 p.m. By Tom Andrews, Special Rapporteur on the Situation of Human Rights in Myanmar. 3 p.m., Special Rapporteur on the Situation of Human Rights in Afghanistan. That's Richard Bennett. Tomorrow morning at 7 a.m., there will be a virtual briefing by the UN Environment Program ahead of the COP27 to launch its annual emissions gap report. Speakers will include Inger Anderson, UNEP's Executive Director, and Anne Olhoff, Chief Scientific Editor of UNEP's Emissions Gap Report 2022. We'll send you the link there for you or your colleagues in different time zones. At 11:15, hybrid briefing with Javaid Rehman, the Special Rapporteur on the Situation of Human Rights in the Islamic Republic of Iran. 1:15, a hybrid briefing by the UN International Independent Commission of the Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel. Navi Pillay, the chair, along with member Milun Kotari and Chris Sidoti, will brief. I believe they will be here in the flesh. Betul.
Thanks, Steph. Let me start with Ukraine. Ukrainian President Zelensky said that Russia used around 400 Iranian drones. Has the UN Secretariat analyzed the information it has received from Ukraine? And what is the latest on sending a team to Ukraine?
Nothing to add to what I've already said, or the few words I've used on that. I don't have anything else to add, or to add to what I said yesterday on that.
I have another question on Syria. This one might have been asked. It's a little old, but I'm still going to ask. When Mr. Patterson, the special envoy for Syria, was in Damascus, he had a press conference, and he said, when he was asked whether Resolution 2254 was working, I quote, "It has not been working so far. We need now to see that we start slowly but steadily to implement the different provisions of the Security Council resolution," end of quote. What does he mean by that? Does he mean that he's open to a different resolution or different ways to find a solution to the crisis in Syria?
I don't think he's advocating for a different resolution. What he's saying and speaking plainly is that there's not been as much progress as we would like to see in the implementation of the various aspects of the resolution. Edith.
Thank you, Steph. Two questions. First, does the Secretary General have any comment on the nuclear exercises that President Putin was watching in Russia today?
No particular comment. We've seen the press reports that I think the Russian authorities had notified the United States and others that the exercises were taking place, but no other comment.
Does the Secretary General have any comment on protests today near the grave of Mahsa Amini, where apparently Iranian security protesters clashed with them?
We'll be following up on those reports. I mean, I think this goes to what we've been saying since the beginning, is that as a matter of principle, people should be allowed to protest peacefully. It's important that security forces conduct themselves in a manner that protects people's rights to peaceful assembly and to peaceful protests. James, and then we'll go to Evelyn.
First, you mentioned the Security Council meeting this afternoon that the UN Legal Council will brief at. Can you just explain to us what the UN Legal Council has been asked to brief on? My understanding is Article 100, which is about who can instruct the Secretary General. But can you just give us more details? Exactly, because clearly you are given, and I assume this is how it works, the presidency gives you a specific subject
for them to brief my understanding.
Can you tell us exactly then what question they'll be answering?
My understanding is that he will be briefing on exactly that, Article 100 of the Charter, which I knew you no doubt have in your pocket.
I haven't got the charter, but I know what Article 100
Okay,
says.
excellent.
Okay, can I, like Betul, I want to pick up an old one which has been on my list and I haven't asked yet, and I don't think you've answered about.
There is a sell-by date, huh?
Okay. But this is still an ongoing story, which concerns the West Bank and foreign visitors to the West Bank being required new rules. In fact, a new 90-page ordinance which restricts the length of time they can spend there. They have to do all sorts of registration things. They have to even register if they have a romantic involvement with a Palestinian. This has come into force now. It's clearly going to affect the economy of the West Bank. What's the UN's reaction?
Let me get some specific language on that. You can ask me again. Evelyn.
Yes, thank you very much. I haven't read the report on the Great Lakes. I don't know if it's been filed to us while I've been sitting here, but there are I don't know what he's talking about from what you summarized, because there are 8, or at least 6 or 8 countries in the Great Lakes. Do they all have deteriorating security? Is it the same for each one?
I mean,
we're talking about the whole East African coast.
We distributed his full remarks, so I encourage you to read them, and then if you have any further questions, to come back. Yep. We distributed his full remarks earlier today, so I'd encourage you to read the envoy's full remarks. They were sent in the email. Yep. Yep.
So there have been media reports earlier today that there has been a terror attack in the city of Shiraz in southeastern Iran when 3 militants opened fire in a holy shrine, and 15 people have been killed. Have you received those reports, and what's your reaction?
I've seen those reports, and if it does turn out to be exactly what the press seems to say that it is, which is an attack targeting a religious shrine, we condemn it wholeheartedly. No one. We condemn acts of terrorism, but I think acts of terrorism, especially targeting religious sites, are especially heinous, and we extend our condolences to all the victims, to the people in the government of Iran.
And a further question, there have been also reports about at least 14 foreign nationals being arrested in Iran during the protests of the past 6 weeks. Not from a humanitarian perspective, but politically. Are you concerned that the detention of so many people from different nationalities, especially those who are affiliated with European embassies in Tehran, is going to trigger a diplomatic crisis that will engulf the region?
I mean, we don't. I can't speak to the motivation or the reasoning why these people may have been detained. What is important is that they were afforded due process, including consular visits and so on, according to the law. But I can't predict. I don't know why it happened, and I can't predict what the impact will be. Sorry, Linda's had her hand up, and then we'll go to Pam.
Thank you, Steph. You mentioned how unsuccessful the UN humanitarian appeal has been for Chad. I was just wondering, how successful is the UN humanitarian appeal for Ukraine?
The Ukraine appeal is well funded. We can give you those exact numbers, and I would encourage you to look on OCHA has a really good website that keeps all those numbers up to date. Ukraine is one of the best and most generously funded appeal. We think there is enough money and capacity to fund all of our humanitarian appeals. It's not about favoring one over another. We know that all member states have competing requirements at home, which may impact their ability to give away from home. And there have been some traditional donors, which have always been very generous. But I think there's more money out there. And I think the tree can be shaken a bit more, and I think it's vital, and it's frankly in everyone's self-interest to also fund all of our humanitarian appeals. Pam, and then we'll go to Sylviane, and then we'll come back up.
Thanks, Steph. The SG wrote a letter about requesting that the Security Council consider a non-UN rapid action force in Haiti. It was originally part of a resolution. It got cut out when the other piece was passed. The resolution on a non-UN rapid action force seems to be languishing. Does the Secretary General still think it's urgent, and what would his message be if he were to write another letter?
Yes, is the message. We continue to believe that it's urgent. We continue to believe that it's important. I mean, he said it once. He continues to believe it. I mean, I don't. If there was another letter, it would probably be a cut and paste from the first, because his position has not changed. Sylviane.
Thank you, Stefan. On the maritime border agreement signature for tomorrow, the signing between Israel and Lebanon, you said that we'll have 2 letters. Can we have the contents of the letters?
No, because what I said is that the letters were between Israel and the United States, and Lebanon and the United States. So I'm not saying you can't have them. I'm saying they're not addressed to us. So you should ask either the parties involved in this exchange of letters.
Thank you.
No problem. Yep.
National News Agency of Ukraine, coming back to the necessity of establishing a special tribunal for the crime of aggression of Russia against Ukraine. I'd like to clarify, what is the position of the UN Secretary General on that issue?
Well, the Secretary General believes that in all conflict there needs to be accountability, right? And there are a number of processes underway, whether it's the Commission of Inquiry set up by the Human Rights Council. We also know that the International Criminal Court has had prosecutors on the ground to collect information. We believe that these processes should move forward. Ephraim and then Stefano.
Thank you, Stefan. Two questions. The repatriation scheme of Syrian refugees back to Syria from Lebanon. The Lebanese authorities are saying that the returns are voluntary, but we know that the scheme was originated by the Lebanese president, whose party, as we all know, runs on anti-Syrian rhetoric and anti-migrants rhetoric. So my question is the UN involved at all in the repatriation scheme? Is there a way to monitor what's happening there?
Well, this ongoing repatriation is not facilitating, is not being organized by UNHCR. UNHCR, I think, said earlier they were being very clear in the sense that they are not facilitating the large-scale voluntary repatriation of refugees. I will just echo what our refugee colleagues say, because they are the authority on that, is that we all respect the fundamental human rights to freely and voluntarily return to countries of origin at a time of choosing, in line with international principles of voluntary, dignified, and safe return and non-refoulement. Our understanding, UNHCR's understanding, is that this is being facilitated by the General Security Office of Lebanon. They're telling UNHCR that these people have expressed their wish to return and registered with the Lebanese authorities to do so. So UNHCR will continue to monitor the situation, but they are not directly involved in this.
And on stories of coercion being practiced.
These need to be fully examined, and I know our colleagues in UNHCR in Geneva and obviously their officers in Lebanon are looking into these.
Okay, second question. Yesterday during the Security Council on the humanitarian situation in Syria, as we were watching the latest developments, by Gerd Pedersen and everyone, there was another event in Washington, D.C.'s Middle East Institute, where a study was discussed, a study by the Syrian Legal Development Program and the Observatory of Political and Economic Networks, an extensive investigation into the UN's procurement operations in Syria. And basically what the study says is that around 50% of procurement is going through actors with a very high risk of links to the Assad regime and to people connected with human rights violations and war crimes. What is the Secretary General's response?
Broadly, I think our interest, meaning, and the interest of donors, of civil society, of recipients, and everybody is the same, which is that we have a principled approach to how we do international assistance in Syria at a time where the needs are growing, right? Even years into this conflict, we're seeing with cholera and other issues. So we've engaged with the authors of the report. We will continue to engage with them. I think many of the recommendations they've put forward in terms of enhanced risk management for contracts and due diligence were adopted by the country team back in 2020. They're continuing to try to improve their methods. The other thing I would say is that there's an increase in terms of value of items that are procured outside of Syria, but there are items that can only be procured in country, right? I mean, telephone, fuel, and so on. It is also important to know that we operate in Syria under the same rules that we operate in every country, right? In terms of currency exchange, in terms of vendors. So we are well aware of the challenges posed by us working in many countries, including Syria. And I think the general effort has been one to continuously trying to improve how we work and how we manage the global taxpayers' money.
Just a quick follow-up on tomorrow's 7 a.m. briefing. Is it here in the room? Or
it's virtual. You can do it from as long as you don't turn on your camera, you can do it from your bed.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you. Stefano.
Thank you, Stefan. Today in Rome, there are about 40 humanitarian organizations, including Save the Children, Amnesty International, and Doctors Without Borders, asked the Italian government, the new Italian government, to not renew the agreement with Libya about practically giving Libya the means to push back, to track back the migrants on the sea, because they say that Libya in this moment is not in this moment, for years, is not a country where those people can go back. In fact, they end up to be in those prison or lagers, if you want to call it. So what does the Secretary General have a message also for the Italian government? Because it's at November 2 is the deadline to change this agreement. If it's not changed if the Italian government doesn't ask,
it's not a message specifically to the Italian government. It's a message to all concerned countries. Is to take a look at the situation in Libya, right? And to ensure that everyone honors their responsibility under international law, under international refugee law, and to treat people, whether they're refugees or not, with dignity in respect of their human rights. I mean, I think just yesterday, 2 days ago, I read a report from the International Organization for Migration showing a spike in the number of deaths in people trying to cross. So we all need to work towards the stabilization of the situation in Libya, for the improvement of the lives of Libyans, but also of refugees and asylum seekers who are living there.
Just a quick follow-up, but do you agree that Libya in this moment is not capable or should not take care itself of those people that try to reach you?
I would refer you to what various UN entities have said about the situation in Libya, and especially the situation in the various detention or holding centers for refugees and migrants in that country, which are frankly horrendous. Mr. Bays.
Just one that I'd like you to possibly respond to, which is a new statement by the Human Rights Commissioner Volker Turk, calling for a moratorium on any forced returns of refugees to Myanmar. Follows news that Malaysia had sent back more than 100 Myanmar nationals, who some of whom had serious protection concerns. Does the Secretary General share that call that no one else should be deported?
The Secretary General firmly believes in his core that no refugee should ever be forced to return, especially to a country that is unsafe and still facing a high level of conflict. I mean, I just read out the situation today in Myanmar. Yesterday, I flagged the issue of Malaysia. There's no. I mean, I don't want to get in the habit of approving or disapproving Mr. Turk's comments because he has his own independent mandate. But I can tell you, I mean, Secretary General, especially given his past as High Commissioner for Refugees, believes what I've just said.
I mean, it was a paper statement from Mr. Turk, so that's why I wanted you to read it into the record.
Yeah, no, thank you.
But lastly, a request from me, if I can, to your human rights colleagues and the document service. There's a lot going on in these days. We are not getting the statements of the rapporteurs and others. which in previous years we have managed to
I
get.
will
Thank you.
lodge the complaint on your behalf.
Thank you.
And where's Paulina?
Let's listen to a press conference with David Eby as he announced that he spoke with the Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia, and he was invited to form government and begin his work as Premier.
Hello, everybody. I was just in with the Lieutenant Governor, and we had a wonderful conversation. She has invited me to form government, which is obviously exciting, and I can't wait to get to work. I am very grateful for the opportunity to meet with her, and look forward to any questions that you might have.
So for the media on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. And you'll be limited to one question and one follow-up. Please remember to take yourself off speaker before asking your question. And our first question will come from Rob Shaw, Czech News.
Do you have a date in which you expect to be sworn in that you talked to the Lieutenant Governor about?
We're working right now on the details. My goal and my hope is to be sworn in before the end of the session so that I'm able to be in the legislature and able to introduce some key pieces of legislation for my first 100 days in office. And obviously when that 100 days starts and I'm sworn in, the work will begin. And part of that is being accountable to the legislature and to British Columbians, and part is delivering on their priorities around housing and healthcare, public safety, and the environment.
Do you have a follow-up?
Sure. Have you met with the mayors of Vancouver and Surrey yet? And if so, what did you talk about? And how does what they say fit into your priorities as an incoming premier?
Well, it won't be a surprise to anybody to know that during my meetings with the mayor of Vancouver and the mayor of Surrey and Victoria, the issues were housing, issues around public safety, homelessness and addiction, mental health issues in the streets. And their interest in working with the province to address these issues. I think there's such an opportunity for us to work together with these municipal leaders. They're all new mayors. They're all excited and ready to go. And I'll be a new premier as well. And the provincial government will be a good partner for them on these priorities.
The next question will go to Binder Sajan, CTV.
Hi, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about the key pieces of legislation that you're looking at specifically. I know you've laid out your 100-day plan, but what are you hoping to get done before the end of this session?
Well, my key priorities are obviously around the housing crisis, the fact that people can't find an affordable place to live, even if they earn a decent income, and issues around public safety, making sure that people are both safe in the sense that when they look at their downtowns, they feel that that's a place that they would like to be with their families, or if they're seniors, they feel comfortable being there. But also for the people who are living outside that are struggling with mental health and addiction, that their safety is part of our priority as well. And we have so many other issues to work on. My goal over the next few weeks will be to work through with our team what the world of the possible is, and to do my best to get in to the legislature before the end of the session in order to be able to deliver on these goals.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, can you tell us a bit about how the conversation went? Obviously, she asked you if you would like to form government, and you said yes, I'm guessing. So you could just talk a little bit more about how that conversation went.
Absolutely. The Lieutenant Governor
asked me whether I believe that I had the confidence of the House, and I said that I did, and she said that she was inviting me to form government. I said I was very honored
that she would ask me, and the answer
was certainly yes. She's a wonderful host, and so we discussed some of her background as a professional and some of mine and my time before government. Conversation, and we had some very small pastries that were quite delicious, and some tea, so it felt
appropriate.
The next question is from Katie DeRosa, Vancouver Sun.
Premier-designate, after you're sworn in, will you commit to the rest of the legislative's fall session if there's a certain number of weeks remaining, or do you think you'll recess until the winter or spring session when you present the budget?
This is obviously a really unusual transition process that's taking place. Usually a government would adjourn adjourn a legislative session for transition to take place. That's not what we've done. We have the session happening right now while transition is also happening. So my goal and my hope is to be sworn in as Premier and be able to sit in the legislature during this session, to be accountable in that way. But also, I'm hopeful to be able to deliver on some key priority areas, even in the short time that remains in the session.
Do you have a follow-up? Do you expect to appoint cabinet ministers on the same day that you're sworn in, or when would a possible cabinet shuffle take place?
Right now, I'm getting briefings from the public service on key issues facing British Columbia, the state of the economy, and obviously the global situation and the impacts it's having on British Columbia, and a whole array of different issues facing different ministries, and in particular, how they're going to impact British Columbians and what our government responses are and will be. So there's a lot going on right now. I'm looking forward to having the opportunity to sit down with my colleagues, meet with them individually, talk about their priorities, not just for their communities, but the files that they have that they've been given by Premier Horgan, to take an assessment of where our government is at and where we're going. And it's not until that process is complete that I'll have anything to say about any cabinet roles or anything related to that.
The next question is from Keith Baldry, Global.
Speaking of cabinet, the Liberal opposition several times now has used an entire question period to demand that John Horgan replace Adrian Dix as health minister, which has been rebuffed or ignored. Are you going to continue to have that position of keeping Mr. Dix as health minister?
Well, I think all British Columbians are aware of the strain that our healthcare system is under coming out of the pandemic, and as well that this isn't an issue that's unique to British Columbia. This is an issue faced by governments across Canada. There have been efforts to engage the federal government on their support for our public healthcare system. An initiative led actually by Premier Horgan, and I'm very proud of his work on that for British Columbia with the Council of Federation. At the end of the day, for British Columbians, it's about are they going to have access to a family doctor in order to be able to get the care that their family needs? If they are in medical crisis, will there be an ambulance? Will the hospital be able to provide them the care they deserve? And that is one of my key priority areas. It's one that I look forward to accelerating our work and finding ways to respond to the needs of those frontline healthcare workers that provide those services we all depend on. And I just want to take a moment and say how proud I am of the work of Minister Dix throughout the pandemic. Really significant work. And I look forward to working with him and with all of my colleagues to address this issue.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just back to the legislation you're talking about. It takes time to draft legislation, particularly if it's fairly complex. Has work already begun on this in terms of drafting legislation that you want to see in front of the House? And if so, when did that start?
So that's a really good question, Keith. People will know that certainly my priority areas, the issues of housing and healthcare and public safety, are issues that we need to address in a really aggressive and urgent way. And that's why I'm trying to work with our team to accelerate and have in place key legislative initiatives to respond to that. It's a moving target. You know, we're in session right now, and I'm working with our team to try to be in a position to be able to do that. I'm talking about my hopes and aspirations here for the remainder of a quickly moving session while we're doing transition, and my goal here is to hit the ground running.
That's all we have time for today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.